much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come join us here today. And welcome to Denver. For those of you who have traveled in for the UTM Storage Summit, it's going to be a great show for 2 days. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot more here. Just kidding. But we were really excited to be able to have this opportunity to host this pre-conference workshop and really get some of the brightest minds in the area of distributed storage and virtual power plants to work with us today. We are live streaming this event, so JT back in the corner there, he's got control of the webcam. Thank you, JT. So there will be some folks, we don't have that hooked up for doing live questioning or anything like that, but for my speakers, just speak up so that the mic can pick you up in the back of the room. And we have a wonderful agenda for you today, which you all should have a copy of in front of you. Starting off with some great research, groundbreaking research by the GTM folks, and Elta, thank you Elta for providing that. She'll take you through some interesting ideas around what we're seeing around the world. We're then going to have a conversation from one of our leaders in the product group, two of our leaders in the product group from Enbala, about why do you need orchestration? This is less about Enbala and the Enbala product, and more about what we're seeing in the marketplace as to why orchestration is so important for building a virtual power plant. And then we're going to wrap the day up towards the end with a panel session talking about the financial impacts of virtual power plants and where's the money, so to speak, where's the value, what are we actually trying to build. I think all of these topics are going to be summarized at the end of the day as we kind of close through the end of the workshop. But before we dive into that content, I really just wanted to share with you a couple of key stories from Enbala. First of all, many of you may or may not realize or know that Colorado is actually our headquarters. Now, we started as a Canadian company, and through the course of continuing to grow and going through multiple rounds of investment capital, we've actually brought in such a large North American contingent of investors and customers that we re-domiciled the company to the U.S. and we house it right here, which is very convenient because I'm actually a native of Colorado. I wonder why we chose Colorado. So a couple of interesting factoids about Colorado and why we're actually here. Anybody have any guess as to how many jobs in the clean energy sector Colorado has? 70,000? Any other guesses around? Any other guesses? None at all. So you're about 3 times too high. It's 26,000 today in the clean energy sector, but growing rapidly. We're actually, I think, second or third in terms of the growth rate of clean energy jobs in Colorado. Being a native, I also have the esteemed privilege to be able to give you this perspective, which is Colorado in the 1970s and 80s was known as an oil and gas state. So, and even today, we have a tremendous amount of our economic development is actually driven by oil and gas. That picture is changing. I do want to just make one quick reference here to our leadership from a legislative perspective, who is trying to drive dramatic change in the state of Colorado. Just at the beginning of the year when Governor Polis took office, he signed into law a number of bills which are dramatically changing Colorado. So today we are actually moving forward towards an 80% clean energy by 2030, with 100% by 2040, fully endorsed by Xcel Energy, our largest power company here in the state. In fact, Xcel Energy helped write part of that plan. Not going to get into the politics of how that happened, but I think it is extremely unique that we're one of the only states in the country where you have both the legislative branch and the large power company essentially saying, here's a plan we can move forward with. Most states have driven this by the legislature imposing something on the power company and the power company fighting it back to them. So we're in a very interesting place. The second key part of legislation was actually driven around the idea that our commissioners, a few of them are here in the audience with us today, they now have to start approving what's called a distribution system plan. So that is a radical change for a state like Colorado, where we did not work on DSPs here. The Xcel had to obviously go through a rate-making process, but not a full distribution plan. And one of the key reasons for this was because of distributed energy and the need for our legislative branches of our government within the state of Colorado recognizing that we need to push electric vehicles, distributed storage, distributed solar in order to achieve these goals. And they have to be integrated with a full DSP. Everybody's scratching their head to figure out how we're going to do that within the state. To be perfectly honest with you, both the commissioners, the power companies, everybody's trying to figure it out. But one of the spirits I can give you about the state of Colorado that makes us extremely unique is the state of Colorado typically operates under a very simple Western premise, which is we're going to roll up our sleeves, which is very unique. There are other stories within the state of Colorado that embody this, such as our public transportation here in the state. RTD, many of you may have taken light rail to get here or came from the airport via light rail, or you've seen the light rail system that goes around here. You've also seen the bus system that's here. One of the best stories about the state of Colorado was when they decided that they needed to change the way we do transportation, particularly in and out of the central core. They created a coalition among all 6 or 8 major cities that surrounded Denver to create RTD and the light rail system that we have today. A lot of cities around the world and around the country, you end up with city-by-city transportation organizations. So Colorado has the spirit of the West, which is we're going to roll up our sleeves, we're going to figure it out. So we're glad you're here. We're glad that GTM brought the event here. First time in Denver, I think, for the storage. We also brought in 14 inches of snow for you last week, which a lot of it is still sitting around on the ground, so apologies for that. It's going to warm up by Wednesday, hopefully. And you do get to experience our wonderful Colorado sunshine over here. How many days of sunshine does Colorado have? Who can guess that?
320.
320, actually the average. Are you a native?
No,
Most natives know that.
I knew that, but I've been here for 15 years, so.
Good enough. Yeah, so 320 days of sunshine, which might have said put the solar panel picture on the slide. So, as we say here in Enbala, is that this picture I think embodies what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how to build this sustainable energy future, and we fundamentally believe that distributed energy, and of course in the context of what we're doing here today, distributed energy and storage brought together is the way to create one of the key ingredients to creating a sustainable energy future. And we really hope that you get a lot out of it today. We have a lot of Enbala team members in the audience. If you all could raise your hands for me. Basically, if you see a guy in a suit, sport coat. No, it's not complete. We did not bring our whole team. We've invited our whole team to attend the reception that's a bit later this evening. But if you need anything, find one of these fine gentlemen who just put their hands up, or Belinda, thank you, who can direct you. Restrooms are around the corner. There's spaces outside if you need to take a phone call. If there's anything you need, feel free to just ask one of us. And with that, I want to just do one very last shout out, which is to our friends at GTM, Elta, Nicole, who's outside, and Belinda. Quick round of applause for organizing this event. They make it easy because we just have to show up and provide the content. So thank you for doing all that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elton, who's going to kick us off here with a tour around the world.
Oh boy.
Let me get the slide.
More on the US and a little bit of the world, but I'm just going to talk about some high-level trends. And I really have to say that this is put on by our events team, the research team, so I show up also and things are ready for us to go. That's a disclaimer right there too. But as I was getting set up here, so because this is kind of a fun topic, a relevant topic, we can all get involved in the conversation. As you can see, the last bit of this workshop is an interactive conversation with all of us. And to make sure you guys are really paying attention. So,
Is it working?
yeah, that is at the very end. So I just scroll.
Well, that's awesome. No, you're
Okay. Yeah, so to make sure you guys are, one, paying attention, and two, are actually feeling involved in the conversation, we're going to do a little fun discussion at the end talking about, setting up a VPP, and if you were to set up a virtual power plant yourself, what are the technologies you would want in the mix? So to do that, it's going to be anonymous, so no pressure. So log into gtm.cnf.io. It can be all lowercase, so it's not too fast. Whether on your phone or on your computer. And you can do it now, you can do it as listening, but type in kind of your favorite technologies. If you were to create a VPP, to stack multiple value streams or one value stream, whatever the reason may be, for creating that VPP, what would it look like? Okay? Low pressure gas storage, because I know we're talking a lot about storage. But yeah, so we'll take a look at that. as the session goes on, and then at the very end, we'll all have a discussion about it. So, there we go, that's me. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elsa Kohler, and I'm the research manager for the Grid Edge research practice at Wood Mackenzie Power Renewables. So Wood Mackenzie Power Renewables came together for the acquisition of a few companies, one of them being Green Tech Media. So Green Tech Media, new site, plus the events, that's hosting the energy storage event tomorrow, and research solar storage and Grid Edge. So I'm on the Grid Edge team that came in through that acquisition. So very briefly, I will talk a little bit about kind of high-level trends and what we're seeing with DR flexibility and transitioning towards talking more about virtual power plants, right? That's kind of the intelligent version of orchestrating distributed resources. So once I do that, Bud and I are going to have a little bit of a discussion as well, to make sure that I'm not just talking at you, but interactive. So I'll give a little bit of the trends, and Bud and I will talk a little bit about the implementation side of this. So that's good for everyone. So to get us started, right, so I keep thinking about the rapid pace of change. So I started working at GTM Research in 2016, and a lot has happened since then. And I just want to highlight a little bit of what's going on at the ISO and RTO level since just 2017 alone, right? So if you look at 2017, we look at a few system operators and kind of the assessments that they were doing to look at the implications of distributed energy resources, both front of the meter and behind the meter on their system. This is kind of some of the discussions that were happening, right? So NISO put out its distributed energy resources roadmap. It's in the process of completing that now. As of late this year, it should have operational its pilot on DERs, which essentially consists of front of the meter and behind the meter solar and storage, and also looking at how high-rise buildings in New York City can provide ancillary services. So 2017 to 2019, we have implementation and moving to get, assess real value streams out of that. ERCOT assesses DERs, specifically looking at reliability impacts on the grid. And I think you probably all saw the news, what happened in Texas's grid this past summer, right? They have nearly a gigawatt of behind the meter distributed energy resources to essentially think about load response and behind the meter generation. That was actually deployed during the summer heat events, right? And just the severity of what happened in Texas this summer, the Texas market caps are $9,000 kilowatt-hour. And on one day, it reached that for 45 minutes. So that's kind of the implications there, and this is what it was assessing in 2017. CAISO was looking at the coordination of transmission and distribution operations under a high DR grid. This was before you had the mandate to have solar on residential rooftops, right? And I think, what we can see now is the increasing activity around storage that will be right as a result of the safety power shutdowns. If you look at PJM, they put out a report in the evolving resource mix and system reliability, and I did look at its demand response strategy. Fast forward to now, PJM is taking a look at its price formation, essentially looking at the implications of renewables on that, and kind of the state and ISO RTO interaction. And also the demand response strategy was really interesting out of that was, will this continue as a product that makes the majority of its money in the capacity market, or what they were looking at in the long term was more towards real-time market participation. And then MISO, in 2017, it did a potential study on demand response, energy efficiency, and distributed generation. If you look at what in 2019, it actually started surveying the distributed energy resources that are not registered with the ISO and RTO. So what's registered now in the form of demand response is around 11 gigawatts, and around 4 gigawatts of that is behind the meter two-phase generation, and the rest of it is for response from your traditional manufacturing and industrial customers. Now, if you look at 2018, right, we also recorded a 4.1 come into play, and that actually started back in 2016, right, that proceeding. But I think what we forget a little bit is that that was actually an aggregation proceeding. Because of the unique attributes of storage, storage was broken out on its own, but we still have this DR aggregation proceeding that's sitting with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. In that order, if you want to look it up, I'll put it up there for you. It essentially breaks it down into looking at that participation of VR aggregations and markets and the technical considerations of the Enbala Power system. And the reason why I bring this up is because once you have Order 841, they held a technical conference to essentially get some feedback in April 2018. There was a little bit of a lull on that. And the next time you had some activity around this was in June of this year, when actually House Democrats were pushing for this proceeding to move along. So we're actually seeing, politics get involved, which is important. And what that essentially led to was in September of this year, FERC saying that it was interested in further exploring the interconnection and distribution of connected meters, so both front of the meter and behind the meter. So essentially what it did was it posed a list of 11 questions to ISOs and RTOs across the country, asking them to, one, figure out how distributed energy resources are connected on their grid, two, where these resources are located, and three, how much of these resources they have today. So these responses were due by October 7th, and stakeholders had 30 days to provide responses to the ISOs and RTOs question, the answers to the question to convert. So for me, initially, when I think about kind of the intricate process of interconnecting DVRs that is even in front of the meter, I would think that this would be probably 100-page plus documents. So the range in what was submitted to these 11 questions, the answers, was between 10 and 34 pages. The majority were around 8 to 10 pages of answers, and then only NISO and ISO New England actually had 30 to 34 pages in responses, which was still, it's comprehensive enough, but not the level of detail if you're looking at further interaction between wholesale and distribution. So in terms of looking at unlocking value streams and opening up markets to distributed energy resources, both individual fleets or looking at an aggregation of various resources, this is one to follow, especially because that compliance filings for Order 841 are due in the next few weeks, right? Day after tomorrow, so how relevant. So it'll be interesting to see the interplay between these two proceedings, right? Because Order 841 open up markets to storage, specific resource. This DR proceeding, if it goes a similar route, the storage proceeding, then you're going to see if actually there's alignment between the two. So it is important if you're looking at monetizing value streams. It's a little bit of that. It's kind of the reality today, when ISOs and RTOs talk about distributed energy resources, they essentially look at them in the form of demand response. So what's in wholesale market footprints today is around 32 gigawatts of behind the meter flexibility, of which, of the registrations that are out there, around 17% is actually fuel-based generators. So a majority diesel, some natural gas. A little bit of the history on behind the meter generators, you actually had around 2 gigawatts more in the market in 2016, but EPA regulations went into effect for emission standards for behind the meter generators to participate in demand response programs. So essentially that knocked out 2 gigawatts from the market. Some capacity came back, a few hundred megawatts did come back after there were some retrofits, but not all of that capacity has come back. One of the interesting things for me here is that talking to some of the demand response providers in PJM that are looking to participate in the max capacity auction, they're actually looking to bring some of that fuel-based generation back into the market. So it'll be interesting to see, one, it's diesel and natural gas, and two, kind of the pairings along with that, because I don't think it's going to be single. But it is still a resource that I think if you look at the broad numbers, is probably a quarter to a third of the total demand response behind the meter today. And it will continue to be a big part of the resource mix. So in terms of what this contributes to the system, it ends up being 3 to 10% of resource adequacy in any given territory. So that's something to keep in mind. It is, it's a small part of the market, but it is significant enough, especially during your peaking days, right? And the resource mix today, I'm just showing the fuel-based backup generators, HVAC control, manufacturing optimization. Water heaters are a really unique entity here. If we look at PJM, And if we look at regulation, the megawatt hours regulation in 2018, it was essentially a 60-40 split between battery storage and electric water heaters. And that's a big opportunity right there in terms of making them more grid attractive, because we do have hundreds of megawatts of water heaters across the U.S. power system, right? And utilities have utilized them as a flexible resource, direct load control for decades, but there's a real opportunity in making them more grid attractive, and monetizing more value streams, and also having more reliability to the system. In a technology that is very, very non-intrusive. Yeah, so growth opportunities, right? We all talk about EVs, we all talk about batteries, and a lot of them. Connected home opportunities and customers actually going out and buying technology when they're afford and or being incentivized by utility programs. And of course, microgrids are the renewable resources within an isolated microgrid for taking that aggregate mix. So when we kind of look at the growth opportunities, we try to find ways to size this market, right? So I mentioned demand response, 32 gigawatts. This varies like plus or minus 2 to 4 gigawatts over the last 5 or 10 years, but not much farther than that. So if we, open this up more broadly and look at all of the distributed resources just behind the meter that we have, today we can see that we have around 90 gigawatts. What we can flex, right? So this is us not just taking our market sizing and our forecasts in terms of the individual resources, but it's actually looking at the percentages of realistically what we can flex in our system. And the cool thing is that we can actually, more than double the 2017 capacity by 2024 if we kind of continue on the growth paths that are there today. And then this is where we're going to talk about orchestration. Right. So talking about rapid growth of EDRs, I mentioned the demand response opportunity, right? That's kind of your traditional emergency resources, and then you tack on around 130 gigawatts of capacity by 2024. Total flexibility that we'll have available. I think the important thing to note here is that we're starting to see more sophisticated models form around these applications, right? So we talk about EV charging. We can talk about these from residential homes that are either isolated in certain parts of the grid and/or virtually aggregated as a resource. Batteries, commercial industrial customers, residential customers. You can look at those again individually or in aggregate. Connected home, initially kind of, you can say you kickstarted with smart thermostats and different business models in terms of bring your own device, and now we're getting into more sophisticated models. I think the most prominent example that we all know is someone bringing 20 megawatts of capacity to the ISO New England market, the solar plus storage. And that's going to come online in the next couple of years. Microgrids is an interesting one. We gave PJM as an example a few times. They have a DR subcommittee right now that is looking at how microgrids, essentially the orchestration of these resources in an isolated part of the grid, can participate in their various programs. And another thing that's happening on the microgrids is also different pairings, right? Traditionally thought of solar plus storage, but you're seeing some of the natural gas backup generator providers coming to the market with the natural gas plus storage pairings. Essentially, you can have a disconnect plus a ride through, which gives you access to more value streams. And this is kind of like the medium term, right? We look a little bit more into the future. This is not something we're going to be discussing probably in this session, but it's important to think about more about what's going on around the and thinking about orchestration of portfolios, right? Because distribution connected resources can be close to the home and in front of the mirror, and you can take that portfolio approach as well if you have the right intelligence attached to it. And I think one of the key things to note here, key player in kind of the growth areas is obviously storage. It's not what's going to be giving the most capacity, but it is growing in the capability. And I think I tried to match up the colors here in the previous graph, right? So what you can see here, this is our deployments tracking from our storage team. and through Q2 2019. And the really interesting part is that if you look at behind the meter, residential, plus C&I, that was nearly 90% of the deployments in Q2 2019. So I think that just speaks to the opportunity behind the meter. We're seeing that level of deployment in DC quarter-over-quarter increasing confidence. And especially kind of looking at the residential focus, right? If we look at individual and compared to the meter and non-residential, there's kind of a limit there. And obviously, this is not the only market where we're seeing this type of activity. The storage is a key player in terms of a aggregation of resources into a virtual power plant. We're seeing similar storage in Japan, right? Where you have on Pepco's system around 50 megawatts behind the meter capacity that's being orchestrated and monetizable for the customer and for the grid in terms of frequency regulation. We're seeing it in Australia. We'll probably get a little more on that, right? Around the 5 megawatt portfolio just today within one project. They have several VPP projects across the country right now, but the important thing here is that this is a residential behind the meter project monetizing again several value streams. Vermont, another great example, utility in the Midwest, seeking to get 10 megawatts of behind the meter storage. And what started as a partnership with one storage vendor now has opened up to bring your own device, essentially choose your own battery vendor to make sure we get the capacity online, and then again, monetizing that and testing. So essentially what I kind of wanted to do was taking a step back, right? I know we honed in a little bit here on the residential side, but if you look at flexibility use cases kind of across the board, essentially, we really took a deep dive into the deregulation piece for VPPs, kind of starting at a traditional demand response and kind of evolving into either various or more intelligent orchestration. Non-large solutions, right? These are really one-off projects, but have proven investment value, right? You have New York mandating the distribution utilities to essentially find on large solutions in the distribution system implementation plans. What they do every couple of years, same thing in California. And then again, if we're looking at grids with higher penetration levels of renewables, the whole idea of firming and smoothing, and if we're talking about behind the meter resource aggregations, we're thinking in terms of load following supply to dynamically balance the grid. So that's where I'm at. And I'm going to chat with Bud a little bit now. How are we doing on time, by the way?
We're great. We're good on time. Let's see.
Yes.
We're gonna, first of all, my mom always told me that if you're having a party and there's no room left, you've held a successful party. So we've got a few chairs left. Do we have any more folks outside?
There's someone through my chair right there.
Cool. We've got some more room in here. We've got room for 10 more at least. Everybody's like, what? Anyway, so a couple questions for you, Elton.
Yes.
So this is a great summary of things that we've seen looking backwards in time in terms of the data, where the megawatts are at, what's being built. What would be your prediction for 2020? What's the main theme you think we're going to see in 2020 in this?
I think electric vehicles. I think electric vehicles are going to be a big one because they're coming and they're coming fast. And, there's a whole question around who should own the infrastructure. You're seeing a lot more utilities being aggressive, asking Public Utilities Commission to be able to own them essentially at these initial phases to make sure to decrease rate anxiety, but also to plan accordingly in terms of hosting capacity on your grid, right? And essentially there you can tack on additional flexibility services if you're looking to add better storage systems which don't have to be owned by the utility. But I think a lot of innovation around that and kind of what those streams look like.
Awesome. Second question I had was related to that the Q2 2019 megawatt data.
Yep.
So that's residential, non-residential, in front of the meter. But where in the world is that? Where in the country are the most of those deployments actually occurring?
California.
California,
I'm gonna let Rob speak to that.
California for behind the meter for sure. Increasing use states like Hawaii, Arizona, New York, New England, we're starting to see a lot of residential storage pick up in those geographies.
I have one last question that's related to that. How much of that is coupled with some other type of source such as solar?
Yeah, the question is, I believe about 50-ish% of all megawatts are coupled with solar. If we zoom into residential specifically, almost all of that is paired with solar. 95% of all residential solar is paired with solar.
Awesome. Great. Now I'm going to open it up to the audience. So you must have some questions on your mind about this work. Yeah, please. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Ignacio Ibaguren with Tier Energy. I'm surprised to see that MISO was such a big chunk of the demand response portfolio, given that, I mean, it has a capacity market, it's not very attractive, and I can't imagine energy prices are more attractive than PJM or elsewhere, and I was just wondering what's driving that.
I mean, they've had that capacity engaged for a long time, so they could get that small capacity payment, but the interesting thing with MISO is that they actually have to call it. So they didn't call it for like 10 years, so it was just like money coming in to just be available, but for the first time in 2017, they called an event. And every 4 to 6 months since then, they've called an emergency event, and then needed more and more capacity to be available within shorter and shorter timeframes. So one of the things that they did earlier this year, before they cleared their 2019-2020 delivery year auction, was that they actually went to FERC saying we need tariff changes and we need this capacity to be available within a shorter amount of time. So they're increasingly seeing the need to dynamically utilize technology, the mix of resources essentially. But they were having the issue that they were calling it, and there were a lot of penalties actually, I think a couple $1 million in terms of the resources saying they were available and weren't. And another thing is that most of these events have actually been out of the summer season, in like the shoulder months, and even some of the so, yeah, they're going to increasingly utilize them.
So in the medium term, say that it could get potentially more interesting market than say PJM or California for these types of assets going forward.
I think it could be. I think you're not looking enough. I think a lot of folks are not looking enough on MISO, but I think you also have a lot more. Correct me if I'm wrong, probably a lot more DG solar coming online in the next few years too. And I know that MISO is looking deeper and deeper into the distribution level and interaction there.
The question probably from your resolution. So we just referred to the chart that we were talking about.
You are.
Oh yeah, still with Freedom Forever Solar. Regarding the chart with energy storage growth, specifically say California, Hawaii, Arizona. Curious, what are the primary drivers of that growth?
Sure. So predominantly, I think from the residential side, it is shift away from coal regulated energy. Hawaii is a unique case. Hawaii, in fact, moved away from coal regulated energy a couple of years ago, and last year they also completely subscribed their grid supply package. So now, pretty much all solar that goes into Hawaii has to be customer supply only, which means either two options, right? Either you just underside the system so that you're not pushing anything back to the grid, or have storage to your assets, then you're basically storing for self-consumption. So most of it is driven by changes on the net energy metering side.
Do you see that as more as a necessity for grid reasons, or is that more legislation?
It is a combination of both, right? In Hawaii, for instance, there is good reasons. Generally speaking, for California, the legislature had, the policy had long been written to publish from energy to then 2.0 keep in mind, right? It's just if 1.5 or 3 cents bypassable or non-bypassable charges that are tacked on to your retail rate. But generally speaking, what you're seeing is that because of this push away from net energy metering, it becomes an additional talking point, an additional driver to what otherwise is typically a capital-oriented market. Now, I don't think that data shows up in those charts yet, but given what we saw with respect to the public safety power shutoff that California has adopted in the past few months, in light of the wildfires in the PJM territory, we expect that the demand, residential storage demand in California is going to double in the next few months.
Thank you.
This is why we're here, by the way. These insights you're not going to get in a conference of thousands of people, so keep the questions coming. Chaz?
Yeah, Chaz Tubman from Rocky Mountain Institute.
You said EVs might be a big growth segment for distributed resources.
I say in terms of looking at like market design and like how to bring them to market.
Okay, yeah, so I was
Right, in
curious,
2020, yeah.
I was
Sorry,
curious
I
what
didn't have-
fraction would actually have
Yeah.
flexible use attached to them? 'Cause
Yeah.
it's-
I'm thinking more in terms of market design because we have to get ahead of it. And I think this is what you're seeing even on utility, charging infrastructure, right? Putting charging infrastructure in place, whether it's utility driven or private sector driven, is to decrease our revenue value. And this is part of, making sure the market is ready.
I mean, even beyond the rate design, beyond sort of market participation, right? I think we are starting to see a lot of utilities even encourage more off-peak charging behavior for customers, right? So a lot of utilities will provide incentives to installing residential chargers and basically convince the customers to charge during 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. hours rather than trying to charge them at 7 or 8 p.m. in the evening. So some of it also customer behavior that is going to impact flexibility and how we view flexibility, but it's not being done through a traditional sort of market and channels that done through some kind of customer education and incentives.
What fraction of like ballpark EV charging at home or work would have a program like that? What's probably not very late, but you said going really fast.
Yeah, it is a huge deal, right? And again, going back to the fact that, again, EV demand or EV vehicle sales are largest in California. California has become a de facto sort of approach towards EV charging. If you include California numbers, that numbers are definitely going to be above 50% of EV charging happens in some paradigm or some peak rate paradigm or off-peak rate paradigm. But if you start to look at other states, they're definitely taking up pace as well in terms of designing their EV charging EV rates.
Yeah. If we look at the Green Mountain Power, bring your own device now, battery storage project, if you look at what they're offering now, it's a whole different offering in terms of not just the storage, there's solar, and also an EV component, an EV charging component to it too. So you see a lot of these programs evolving to that.
Sorry.
Who wants to do it? John Bringer with Petros, and I wanted to pick up on the Green Mountain. The graph went by quickly. Is that a residential only program, or is that available for residential?
It's
Yeah,
residential. It's residential, right, yeah.
And it's relatively new, but it's very creative. I love the program. Has there been are you aware of any studies that have been published about like customer satisfaction or customer recognition of benefits and values, things of that nature?
I think anecdotally we've heard from installers that they are, customers are definitely interested in signing up into these programs. I think from what I remember, the phase 1 of the program was supposed to be just 500 students, and it's definitely gone past that 500, and now they're in phase 2, where again it's some Tesla batteries and some other bring their own devices into the program. So generally speaking, the customers are happy with such programs, given that they A, get back up, and B, the customer also acknowledges that effectively the utility saving money by using those assets to minimize their peak charge payments.
And just last point, same topic. Are you aware of any other utilities who are following that model at this stage in Vermont, the Green Mountain model?
Massachusetts and Rhode Island National Grid actually has initiated a connected solutions program. And again, it's very similar to Green Mountain Power One. Customers would get, I believe, for Rhode Island, it's about $350 per kilowatt per year payment as an incentive for 5 years. In Massachusetts, I think they split it into summer and winter payments. So I think the summer payments are $500 and the winter payments is $50 per kilowatt per month per year. So it's not.
It's still compensation.
It's still compensation, and if they believe that they would be called upon 50 to 100 units per year.
Yeah, those are, I'll just dovetail in here with our perspective. So those are definitely being done under what I would call a demand response type business model, or a traditional DR North American type business model. The If you look outside of North America, you will find other business models that are being followed by other energy suppliers for residential behind-the-meter batteries. Elton talked briefly about the AGL project in Australia. That is a behind-the-meter, customer-driven program. The customer gets zero incentive. The customer pays for the battery 100%. AGL then gets the right to dispatch it. However, they're putting that on a long-term, very good energy contract because it's a deregulated market. So there's a different type of incentive structure, which is we're going to give you a better price of energy. But there's also reliability concerns. Lots of things happening in Australia that change the dynamic there. AGL has now opened that project up to any customer that has a residential energy storage unit. And it's a bring your own battery based approach that they've now opened that up to. And there are tens of thousands of those units that are coming online in the AGL construct. I will also answer your customer satisfaction question because they are an energy retailer, so they live and die by customer satisfaction every single day. And they've done extensive work in that area. They don't necessarily share it because they're highly competitive. But I can guarantee you that it's been done. Yeah, you're referring to AGL. AGL, yeah. Okay. As you can imagine, they're in the market every day. It's like Origin, Energy Australia, and 42 other energy retailers in Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, etc. The average switching time for a customer in Australia is 2.5 months. So it is the telecom industry there. Right. Just to put it in that context, it is literally cell phone for free. Sign up to our plan for 2 years. It's like Texas. It's like Texas. But the wholesale market is constructed very differently than Texas. They have 6 value streams they can take these products into. But it is very much a dynamic, very live market. And we're going to talk about the technology behind that program here shortly.
So, but Nick T. Lovich with Electric Power Research Institute. I missed the whole thing, so I apologize for being late. Maybe you already went through all this, but you mentioned like latency programs, demand response, and things of that nature. Do you see with your work at Enbala and just the EPP as a whole, like this local communication happening with legacy protocols like OpenADR, or is it going towards like new things like IEEE 12.30.5? Where do you see it today? Where do you see it going?
I think the short answer is sort of from an Enbala perspective. I'll answer from our perspective. There's two things at play. The first thing that's at play is the business model and the economics and the value construct, which we've been talking a lot about in some of these questions. North America today is so largely driven by what I would call a traditional demand response type value construct. And the markets haven't yet evolved to the point where they need full real time. So you're kind of in this market is still doing hour ahead, some type of time frame based demand response dispatch. That means the protocols haven't been forced to evolve beyond your very basic OpenADR, etc. You go to a place like Australia, where you're living in a frequency, energy, capacity, and wholesale market that is fully real time. OpenADR can work, right? Because it doesn't work to support that kind of business model. So the two are very much connected, and I think our entire industry, writ large, everybody in this room and all of your colleagues, we get very focused because we're engineers on the technical, and we have to connect it to the business. And if we can connect it to the business side and like what's the market needs, you're going to quickly realize that the traditional demand response type models for protocols and integrating these devices don't quite get in there when we try to go to these more fast, real-time business models. Not a great answer to your question because I do not have a silver bullet for you, right? Because now you look at what else is out there. There's the SEP 2.0 evolution. There's 2030.5. There's what Duke has tried to do under the coalition of willing. And yet we still have an alphabet soup of protocols, right? That haven't yet matured to a point where everybody says this is how it's supposed to work. And I just wish we would kind of move past the technology and focus on the needs discussion to get through this protocol. Right now, we support in our platform everything. We're supporting almost 45 different protocols today because of this problem.
I know it's striking. Thank you.
It's cost of doing business for us, but we can support our customers so much better if we have a different solution. Okay, I think we're good here because we got to keep moving.
Good job.
Thank you so much, Elsa. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Really a wealth of knowledge there. The slides don't quite do it justice in terms of the work that WoodMac and GTM do in terms of research. As you can tell, Elton and Robbie both deep in the subject. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Now I'm going to be asking Mike Ruth to come to the stage. So Mike is going to be talking a bit on the technology side. So we're going to move away from some of the business model conversation, and we're going to be sharing with you this question of why do you need orchestration? And I just want to preface it with the example we just talked about, which is in a demand response world. And, largely, most of you know my history was building demand response companies for many years. It was at Converge for 12 years, something like that, and helped build the demand response industry. And one of the interesting things about the demand response industry was that what we used to say at Converge was, as long as it looked like an air conditioner, everything looked like an air conditioner. Because what we did was we send out messages to things and we ask them to just turn off. Right? It's pretty straightforward. But now we're starting to move into a world where these resources, you don't just ask a battery to turn on. You don't just ask an electric vehicle to turn off. It's a storage asset. It can do all kinds of things in the power system. It is connected to a smart inverter that can do all kinds of fancy tricks. So this is why we believe that orchestration is fundamental and core to the need for you to be able to really leverage the power of these assets. And for some of our competitive companies who are deploying, kind of batteries and other types of devices in the demand response world, and they basically say we're going to take a best efforts ability to just turn stuff off. We usually use a different S word, but I won't do that here because we're live streaming. Just turn stuff off. It's not going to work. It's not going to actually meet the needs of what we ultimately need in this industry. So Mike's going to share with you our perspective on this, but this is done as a dialogue. So there's going to be a lot of audience interaction here. And the last thing I want to mention is we will, after this session, take a short break before our panel session. And while you're on the break, please don't forget to pick up your Enbala t-shirt, because this is the latest version of what we're calling nerd couture. Okay? We guarantee you that if you wear this t-shirt, everybody will stop you and say, "What the heck is that?" And you get to try and explain it. Okay, so this is actually a feedback control with my control systems engineers. If you want to actually figure it out from there, ask one of our Enbala folks. They'll tell you the rest of the story. While I get up the slides, where's the clicker? The clicker's right there. So please pick one of these up on the short break.
So thank you everybody for coming today. Really happy to see a full room here. So I'm Mike Ruth. I have product management here at Enbala. Well, let's get the slides going there. I've been at Enbala for about 3 years, and I thought I would start these slides as a product guy with a little bit of a product roadmap. We all like our roadmaps. So interesting mishmash of pictures here. This is actually a little bit about how I found my way to Enbala 3 years ago. Early on in my career, I had the opportunity to work with Sony to help build their early PlayStation and help them manufacture their semiconductor chips that went into that. Followed by being able to work with Alfa Romeo to help bring real-time operating systems into their racers to get telemetry off of those cars at 150 miles per hour. In between, working with AWS on ad tech, some golf tech in the middle there that didn't go anywhere. And before Enbala, soon after I came to Colorado, I found myself at my first energy company at a little startup called Tenroll, and had a chance to work with them to bring their first home energy management system to market. You see actually a home energy display there. That was one of the first devices to integrate to the smart energy profile and Itron meters, bringing meter data off of consumers' homes and presenting it for the first time, exposing that to them. So the theme here is I love technology. I love working between customers and engineers to understand the problems of the market and build products that solve those problems. So about 3 years ago, when I had the opportunity to join Enbala, it was actually a really easy decision for me. When I listened to Bud talk about the mission of the company to bring a sustainable energy future, figuring out how to leverage all of these new grid edge energy resources in the grid, seemed like a real challenge. And so that kind of brought me to Enbala to figure out how to work with these guys, okay? How to take advantage of these beautiful batteries and maybe not so beautiful TVs from a point of view. So what I hope you learn over the next hour or so and through the dialogue with the other folks in the room here is come away with a little better understanding of some of the drivers for the need for orchestration, how we see that, the kind of problems we see orchestration being able to solve in a world of DERs. Actually, I hate saying that, DERs, assets, or distributed energy resources. So we hope you come away with have a better understanding of some of the drivers, some of the challenges around those, and the variation that we see working with a myriad of DERs. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if there's a bit of information or two for those of you that are working on the next generation RFP, or as consultants trying to understand what are some of the requirements for those next generation systems that are going to be able to take advantage of distributed energy resources, we hope that you take at least a bit of information away from our experience and our point of view here that can flow into helping you define those requirements a little bit better. So how complex could it be? That's part of the answer to why you need orchestration. No two distributed energy resources are the same. You'll find that here through the presentation. So to kind of kick things off, and this is going to be interactive. I have a couple slides to kind of set the stage, and then we'll get some audience participation as we go through this. Everyone's seen a slide like this. I think with this audience, I don't need to make the case that the world is becoming more distributed. It's here today. We all know that. I don't need to make the case. Actually, Elta talked to some of the trends that were driving solar and storage, and EVs were mentioned. The trends are obvious. They're accelerating. We know it's coming. There is a challenge, though, an open question around how do you maximize the value stack? How do you get every aspect of flexibility out of these resources that are sitting at the grid edge? And that's part of the orchestration, part of the orchestration approach that we believe in is the answer to how to extract maximum value from these resources. Orchestration is the answer. The question is why? So we see 3 primary drivers for the need for orchestration. And they're outlined here. So one, when we look across the market and all the stakeholders and the various programs, there are multiple objectives that we're trying to solve at any given time. And sometimes there's simultaneous objectives that may be complementary or may be conflicting. So multiple market objectives, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Variability of DERs. A Tesla battery is not the same as a Sonnen battery is not the same as a Solar Edge battery. A water heater from A.O. Smith is different from a Quanta or from Quanta's Switch from other vendors. So no 2 DERs are the same. I'm going to share some examples around that variability. And then uncertainty. There's things that even as engineers we can't predict or forecast or engineer. And orchestration helps address all of these. So let's dive in a little bit. So when we think about multiple market objectives, and as a product guy, I always like to start with the customer and my stakeholders, whose problems am I trying to solve? So I think about the markets, I think about my customers, energy service providers, utilities, and I think about this as a matrix. Starting at the top, I see objectives that are driven out of financials and out of statutory requirements. As a utility, you are looked to provide a resilient and reliable grid, reliable power to your customers. In some cases, energy efficiency programs and customer satisfaction programs, especially in the retail energy space. But as you drill down, underneath these, there are sets of programs and technical problems that ultimately are all trying to be solved to deliver on these. So let's walk down through that. So to deliver on some of those statutory programs, there are frequency response products, frequency regulation, demand response was mentioned a little bit ago, energy efficiency programs, bill management. These are all examples of kind of programmatic factors that are adding complexity to how do you use DERs most efficiently within the grid. Underneath each one of those programmatic problems, there's a technical problem that you're trying to solve, or a technical aspect of the grid that you're trying to control to deliver on solving that problem. So for frequency response, you're trying to control frequency, maybe power together with that. Demand response, power problem, okay? Energy efficiency, you're trying to solve a feeder problem, then you're dealing with voltage and current. Later on, additionally, depending on the type of program and the type of problem you're trying to solve, there's different topological aspects to the orchestration that you need to do. In the traditional demand response space, you'd organize your DR program by residential, customers who are participating, commercial, industrial. But when you're dealing with voltage and solving a problem on a feeder, we're trying to address a getaway cable current problem, you're actually dealing at the feeder level. Very different topology than a group of similar customers. You need to understand a logical view of the network, not just the customer type. And then finally, there's scale. So depending on the type of problem, the type of customers you're dealing with, the types of DERs, there's a scale factor that layers in here. So all of these together basically creates a multi-dimensional problem set or problem space. And when you're trying to solve any one of these or any two simultaneously, there may be an intersection. Let me give you an example. So imagine a DR program. Okay? DR exists typically as a reliability program for the utility for cost avoidance. Okay? Let's just start with that. Well, it's solving a power problem, and you may have a set of customers across residential, commercial, and industrial. Okay? Varying degrees of scale. Might be tens or hundreds of industrial sites to hundreds of thousands to millions of residential customers. This seems pretty straightforward of how these various factors are connecting together. Now imagine you have, in parallel, a frequency regulation product, frequency response product in the market. Okay? And you have wholesale market participants who are bidding their assets in to participate, to extract value from their DERs as part of that program. Okay? You're there trying to solve a frequency problem, it has a power aspect as well. Okay? Imagine that set of residential customers who have battery in their smart inverter-based battery in their garage. That battery can be used for both DR and frequency regulation. Now you have an orchestration problem. Okay? If those happen to coincide, or you're trying to schedule those, which takes priority? Example. Imagine now you have yet another program. Okay? Now you have frequency regulation. Okay? And And you can see how the problem compounds as you add more programmatic elements to the grid and wanting to use these distributed energy resources. This is a key, this is from an orchestration perspective. Orchestration helps you address that prioritization across programs, making sure you understand what kind of technical problem you're solving and is there an intersection between those, and handling the topological and scale factor of making sure that you're dealing with the asset set that is most optimal to solve that problem. Nothing more, nothing less. So I want to walk through an example kind of at the programmatic level that might bring this home a little bit more, and then we'll stop, and I'd love to hear the audience's reaction. So this, for those of you familiar with demand response, this should look pretty familiar. And from an Enbala's world, we think of everything from a generator perspective. So load curtailment and generation increasing is up, okay? And increasing load is down. So what you see on the left-hand side here is a 1 megawatt load curtailment or a demand response event, looking for a megawatt of capacity. And during this event, we're setting a set point in yellow there. The white is the overall VPP, the fleet of assets that are being controlled to that set point. And along the way, we're calculating a real-time baseline. What would have this asset actually been doing if we weren't controlling it? Okay? So that we can be assured that we are achieving the relative capacity adjustment that we're looking for, not just an absolute value. At an asset level, the 3 green graphs on the right there, you can see what it looks like at an asset level. So left is at an aggregate at the VPP level. On the right-hand side, you have 3 different assets. One is the top one has a fairly nice response. Looks like there's a constraint. It's actually not, the set point is the orange at the top. It's actually not responding along the green line to the actual set point. So something is happening and we're not getting the response out of the asset that we want. Second asset there, actually it has a very slow response, but you actually see it gets closer to the set point in the end. Okay? And the third asset at the bottom there actually started, and then something happened and it opted out. Okay? Orchestration allows you to handle those variations. No 2 assets are going to respond ideally or identically. And orchestration is an approach, and optimization is an approach that allows you, with real-time feedback and control, to account for those variances and handle that. It's a fairly simple load shape. Now contrast that to a frequency regulation signal. Okay. A little different. Anybody think it's a little different? Yes. So here, for frequency regulation, you have a very dynamic signal. So those of you not familiar with frequency regulation, basically you receive a 3-second AGC signal, or an AGC signal every 3 seconds from the system operator, and you are contractually, you've contractually signed up to follow that AGC. So basically each point along this curve is a different set point that the VPP is following. Okay. So the VPP level view, aggregate view of all the assets in the fleet, and here's a breakdown of what it looks like at the asset level. Okay. So very different level of control, different programmatic type of problems that need to be solved to deliver to the market. In frequency regulation, you are obligated to provide this power within a acceptance, called an acceptance channel. So you have 30 seconds to respond and 5 minutes to hit the set point. Okay? It's not after the event and the beat. Okay? Where you can pull the data, do the analysis, and report to the entity how you do. Okay? So very different programmatic aspects to running a DR program versus versus frequency reg. I'm gonna stop there. Would love to hear folks' perspectives on other programmatic variances, other challenges that you see. I can step back to this chart. I'll take my little dots off there. But we see this as a kind of a multivariable equation that we're constantly trying to solve. And orchestration is a key approach that allows us to do this. So I'd love to have comments.
So I'm going to introduce Jeff Conley here. Jeff's our Chief Operating Officer and actually runs our product management team based here in Denver. And Jeff is going to be the MC for the next part of this discussion in terms of getting some audience feedback. What are the problems you're seeing? What are the challenges you're seeing?
Yeah, as Mike just said, we were just curious in the room if you had examples on this chart of variances that you're seeing in terms of scale, technical solutions, technical assets. We have a few, and we're in international markets. We want to know what you're facing, just to make it that dialogue.
So my name is Ron Horstman. I'm a questionnaire power administration. And thank you for putting this up here, by the way, because it gives us a good picture of how complex this is. My question is, if I take my hat off and walk back and put it on my consumer hat, my consumer side of me says, there's way too many factors there. So we're never going to reach what all the consumers want. And one size does not fit all in this world we're in. How are we going to address those issues?
Yeah, good question. I think from my perspective, utilities are having to face that all the time with program design, and they're having to take a really complex world and simplify it to an offer, right? As Bud said, sometimes we're seeing capital expenditure offsets, so here's a free thermostat or discount battery, and in other cases, as you're well aware, I'm sure, it's a direct DR participation, pay as you go, how much you can participate program. It's harder to explain. I think honestly, it's the job of the utility to design an overall program design that encompasses all, as many of these as they can, and simplify for the consumer. But it's different per market. I don't have a single answer for all that.
Yeah, I think what I would add is at the end of the day, when you're engaging with consumers, it does come down to choice and their desire to participate in these type of programs, and giving them the choice to be able to opt out. There may be penalties associated with the program they signed up for or not, but providing the consumer that button, that ability to opt in or opt out is key to engage with consumers. And you'll hear me on one of the next pillars talk about what that means from an orchestration perspective, so I'll come back to that.
Maybe just what Mark pointed out is that in traditional DR examples, it was a very manual approach. Every customer knew what was the event, right? Elton spoke earlier about water heaters and unique applications for those. We have a program in the Pacific Northwest where twice a day we're shifting energy usage from those water heaters off peak. And that's happening every day, twice a day. So the customer needs to be paid just an annual incentive. It's not a per event thing. So the lighter touch you can make with each of the assets, then you can change program design, right? And make it really simple. Just say you're either opted in or out. You're not being paid per event or per hour of participation.
Can I add something? Oh, sorry.
I'm getting to speak up.
I was just gonna say, utilities have had a lot of programs in place across the US. I would probably name 10 programs where they've had a customer base engaged with the traditional demand response program for 10, 20 years. And it's not exactly the case that they need that demand response, but they have a customer base engaged, especially on the residential side. So they're just keeping their programs active, not expanding them, not increasing marketing efforts, because they know that they will need them in the future. And I think that's really powerful to think about it in those terms.
My name is Jeff Bork. I'm from the Alberta Utilities Commission in Canada. So we operate in a deregulated market. So I see a challenge in any distributed resource, but batteries being the most poignant one, where you have a product that flows from the transmission system through transmission tariffs to the distribution system, and the whole system was designed to sort of take that into account to make the physical market and the financial market sort of align. But now, in a certain sense, if you're doing this distributed virtual power plant, that physical energy never makes it through those tariffs. So it looks like negative load. So then all of a sudden you've got all of this positive supply that's showing up as negative load and sort of dodges some of the aspects of your market, because that physical energy doesn't flow through those tariffs. It goes to your neighbor next door. And so there's a ripe opportunity for what they call cream skimming, where you're taking advantage of that. Great, I contributed 5 megawatt hours to the market, but didn't have to account for any transmission or distribution losses or anything else like that. So how are those types of things accounted for? Do you see that yet? Like, how does a market player say, well, that's supply or that's negative demand, and then how do you deal with the increased complexity of the physical versus financial transactions? There's a lot there, sorry.
I can have a shot at it, and Bud probably has some views as well, and Mike. From my perspective, utility programs we're seeing are accounting for any charges they're exposed to, right? So if you are let's say, fully integrated utility, then you're able to bake those kinds of costs into your system, right? I'll use an example like PNM in the Southwest, fully integrated, they have distribution charges baked into, but they know on these peak hours where we're going to curtail load, they know what impact that has on distribution costs and transmission costs at those times. Other companies we're seeing in the Northeast or in Europe, they're deregulated. It's much more difficult, and they have to have a different calculation. But they know typically when they're going to call those events, and they know what impact normally that's going to have on distribution charges if they don't run the wires, or like you said, charges that come down through the transmission system. They have to account for that. And I would just add one point, which is in Europe, we're seeing more than just reduced load, right? Even with generation, we're seeing at times a net generation effect in certain regions, right? If you have distributed generators or high penetration of solar, entire regions that are actually supplying energy back into the grid, right? That maybe otherwise weren't. So it's more than just reducing load as well. They have to consider. I don't know if you had anything to add there.
So, I mean, that is probably, I think, one of the most complicated market design questions that typically comes up, particularly around energy storage that can provide electrons and consume electrons. Given that Alberta is deregulated, I actually think you're one step further down the path of solving this problem than places who are not deregulated. In the places where we've seen deregulation and energy storage sort of being accounted for in this way, one of the key hallmarks of those markets is also an energy imbalance market. The energy imbalance market helps cancel out these ebbs and flows in the energy side of things, while you're allowing the resources themselves to be used for, call it ancillary services or other types of capacity type products. So roll that all the way forward to what we've seen in places like Australia. You have energy imbalance market, you have a capacity market, you then have a straight up energy market, not the imbalance market, straight up energy. But then there's 6 ancillary services markets that are all running in parallel. And so that's what's trying to help counteract that. And because of the deregulated nature of the actual market down below, it sort of begins to take care of itself, if you will, by allowing the market to take on it. I don't have a sort of answer for it. That's a really tough question, particularly with deregulated. By the way, I'm sure GTM will do a bunch of research for you. I just want to flip the question over to away from market design for a minute to talk about devices and assets. So when you get down into this world, who else is seeing this complexity factor go up? But some of my utility friends in the room could bring up.
Yeah, again, Nick, with that brief, I think you asked the question to offer up, some case studies. I'd be curious to see how you answer it with this very wide, deep world that you're showing on the screen. Robbie talked about public safety power shutoffs that he's got up in California. But again, we talk about California too much sometimes, but this is a really good example of a project that we're developing right now with PG&E. One battery to do 3 things. One is increase PV hosting capacity because there's a lot of PV and people want to install a lot more. And there's voltage violations on the feeder. So that's point 1. So how do you do that? Select all those boxes. And then the second would be the school has to pay for it. It's a school district. They want to participate in the market. They want to do some, the greatest returns with maybe frequency
response. So that's two. And then the third is there's fires, and they need to keep the community stable, and they want to have backup. So now you have these three things that need to happen, maybe concurrently, generally to when the grid is up, right? So how do you kind of walk through an Enbala mindset orchestration to weigh, what is the right? Is it all a function of business, but it's like frequency regulation is going to get you $80,000 a year of revenue. Don't do any PV hosting capacity, well then PG&E is upset. Or do all PV hosting capacity and then minimize the returns.
And just two clarifying points, who owns the asset there? Who paid for it?
This is unique. It's a front of meter, 1 megawatt, 1 hour asset that is owned by the school.
The school?
Yeah, it's a unique one. Usually it would be owned by the utility, right?
Okay. And then what was the third use case?
Resilience, customer resilience.
For backup during the public safety shutdown.
Right.
Type. I mean, first of all, we are normally selling the software platform to the utility customer, not the asset owner, and that's a really important difference. So if the school paid for the battery, this isn't normally our approach, but I would be asking the school, what are your value streams and how are you going to be paid, and to what extent do you care or are financially incentivized by PV penetration in the area, right? I mean, maybe they have non-financial goals that they want to have a certain solar penetration, but they would have to force rank those three. The way it works in our system is we turn any of those motivators, be it financial or not, into financial levers, and then we financially optimize for a day, month, year, at any given second, how to maximally optimize that battery. So in your example, if you had no shutdown, you had regulation going on, you would also be, for hosting capacity, absorbing solar in the direct day to keep the voltage down, and then discharging back on during evening hours, for example. You can do that and participate in frequency regulation. Mike's going to get into some topology examples. So those two would be doing simultaneously. And of course, as soon as the grid is off, neither of those are possible. So you have this course ranking that says, and my third case is they go into backup mode, right? Just to elaborate that on that a little bit. Backup mode, you might say, I never in my first two use cases want to go below a 20% state of charge in the battery, just so I have a certain amount of backup. That's another constraint we can build into our system so that while you're doing use case 1 and 2, you're never violating, the potential of needing to do use case 3 when it's unscheduled. So in summary, you have to work with whoever paid for the asset and turn all those levers into financial levers, and they'll all be optimized in our system. We reference often our optimizer as a market clearing mechanism, and it is literally a financial market clearing mechanism inside the market.
This is Jazz again from RMI. So all of this technology relies on a really high uptime, instantaneous information feedback loop. So my head's like, how reliable is it? What happens when the internet goes out or whatever? Or how's it like, because that messes everything, certainly on the 2-second frequency. But like, you got everything else.
So this is wonderful straight math for the next section of this presentation, because I think it comes right to the core. Like, this is the complexity of how all these put together. But now you have to talk about what are you doing this, why are you doing this in the fleet? And so why don't you take it from here into the next part of the discussion? Sure. And I'm kind of trying to speed you along too. But that's the dialogue is awesome. The dialogue is awesome. So just I got my panel over there is Jonesy to get at their chairs if you're.
So before I move on to the next pillar, the last slide here around the market drivers and market problems, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the topological and technical layer in that prior slide. So from a topology standpoint, as I mentioned, in traditional DR and regulation programs, you're basically trying to solve a system level issue. So you can have a fairly flat topology, you can have a fleet of assets, and you can dispatch them to deliver the capacity that you need on the grid. But as soon as you start moving into feeder optimization, some of the more advanced DERMS use cases that are being envisioned in the market today, you have a very different topology that you have to deal with, because there are upline and downline interactions and relationships that you need to understand. The orchestration needs to understand what is my closest neighbor, what is my next available DER to solve a voltage problem at some point on the grid, and how, if I change the set point here, does it affect things downstream. So instead of a flat topology, an orchestration equally needs to be able to handle a network view of the topology and where these DERs sit within the network and against the problem that you're trying to solve. So that then ties into the technical aspect where, depending on the type of technical problem you're solving, power or frequency, you need a different topology than if you're solving voltage or current. All of those, if you're trying to solve these simultaneously, needs to be understood and accounted for through the optimization and the orchestration. So, I touched on that a little bit before, but there's some visuals. Hopefully that brings home the point a little more of what we're talking about on those fronts. Okay, so next section here is around the variability across DERs. Historically, I think we all know we've dealt with loads in DR programs. We have generation assets from diesel generators to CHPs to fixed line gas generators. But now in the advent of batteries, we have these bidirectional things. They can actually be a load, they can charge, or they can generate, and they can discharge. So the first aspect of this new world of DERs and batteries is that we have additional asset types that, from an orchestration perspective, you can solve the same problem in multiple different ways. You need to curtail energy on the grid, you can reduce load, you can increase generation, you can stop a battery from charging, or you can have a battery start charging. Okay? 4 solutions to the same problem. Okay? So fundamentally, that's an orchestration and an optimization problem. What is the best financial or potentially technical dispatch to solve that problem? Going a layer deeper, any one of those asset classes, pick water heaters, pick batteries, there are varying behaviors between assets. Okay? No 2 assets will respond the same. You saw the little graphic a little bit before. 3 different assets, 2 different cases, all responding differently. And that's driven by a series of constraints. There may be technical constraints of one make or model, or constraints of one site over another site. There may be differences in the resolution of the telemetry that we're getting from one asset to another. Different mechanisms around how you control those assets that result in a variance in the response from those assets. Storage, okay? A diesel generator with a tank has storage, okay? It can only run so long, okay? Before you don't have that flexibility anymore. A gas generator on a fixed line is infinite storage. You can run that at its cost, essentially infinitely. So the sense of storage across assets. What's the storage of a water heater? How do you translate the amount of heated water in the tank into an equivalent kWh that you can compare? Is this water heater better to flex than the battery, the Tesla battery in my garage? All of those are variances that, through an orchestration process, you are trying to normalize or to normalize so that you can do a comparison, cost or technical, to determine what is the best asset. Then finally, in this world of DERs, you have a very rich and vibrant multi-vendor ecosystem as well. That's only growing. And to Bud's point, around 45 different integrations that we've done. No two integrations or APIs are the same, guarantee it. Okay? Even if they say they are OpenADR certified, those EI reports, okay, those of you familiar with OpenADR, are going to be variances between vendor A and vendor B. Here's just some examples of the difference in across the number of the different kind of integration points that we faced. So from a control perspective, okay, we have assets, we have DERs that basically we have a binary control point. We turn it on or turn it off. Typically, it's can you turn it off if it's on. We have others that we actually can set a actual power set point to. And there are other vendors that basically allow us to control their group of assets. We can't control individual ones, okay? Even if we only need half of their capacity, we can only control all of those thermostats from that vendor. So from an orchestration standpoint, we need to understand if we want to go control those thermostats, we're going to get all of that capacity, okay? Not just one thermostat or half of them if they only do half. We have assets that their response changes over time, where we get feedback from a vendor that the maximum state of charge of the battery degrades. Okay? So that's good information to have, so we know we can't flex it to its rated capacity. Okay? But if we don't have that from vendor B, then we may think we can get this, but it's going to degrade and we're only going to get this. So changing response, sometimes we get that information, sometimes we don't. So again, orchestration needs to be able to account for these variances between DERs. Different speeds and feeds of telemetry and the latency of that information from these vendors, and then we get into error handling. This is just kind of a high-level summary of the kinds of different integration issues working with multiple vendors in this world of DERs that a platform and orchestration system needs to be able to handle. So I want to do a quick case study here, actually give you an example. I think, Bud, you referenced that we'd be sharing some of the technology or example of the technology. So I want to walk through a mixed asset multi-vendor orchestration that we've run. This is a 1,000 battery fleet of batteries, solar in residential homes. Let me describe what you're looking at here first. Step around these for a second. So the top graph here, basically, in the x-axis, each one of these lines is one battery, and it's either showing is it charging, is it discharging, or is it at a state of rest. Okay, and so you have 1,000 batteries that are sitting there in the fleet, ready to be orchestrated. Down here, you have a fleet level view of that fleet of batteries, VPP level view. So this is kind of the state of the fleet prior to a dispatch. And as we go into that, so you can see there's a variety of states of these homes. Some are charging, some are discharging. We don't know whether they are running their dishwasher or loading laundry, and the sun isn't shining, and so it's using the battery rather than energy from the grid. All that we know is the state of those assets, and we want to dispatch a megawatt across those assets in the optimal way. And so as we go into the event, you can see that we selected through the optimizer the ideal set of assets based on their state of charge, on the cost of energy, and have selected a set of those assets to deliver the first almost megawatt there. And as we continue through, we see some of those assets actually start to hit constraints. We may have depleted the storage in those batteries, and as we're getting the feedback from those assets, the VPP, the system, the orchestration realizes that we're not receiving, we're not delivering the overall capacity that we've requested. And so we dispatch additional assets to make up for the shortfall. And then at the end of the event, the assets go into a state of recovery. Some of them may start to discharge or start to recharge. Some actually, if the sun isn't shining, actually may continue to discharge, providing energy to the home in lieu of pulling energy off of the grid. So now I'm going to show it in real time, but this should show. Just to show it's real. So that's an example, I think that pulls together kind of the key points around the variability of DERs, that no two assets are ever going to respond the same. You have external inputs that you may not know. What is that home or what is that site doing at any given time? And being able to account for those differences and still deliver reliably the capacity that you want is a key requirement for the orchestration system. Anyone have any questions about what I just covered, either the example here or back on the slide? One question.
Yeah, just curious if you can elaborate any more on this example. 1,000 homes and system capacity services, and can you share where it's located generally and what type of assets you're communicating with?
We'll let Bud answer.
Yes, we can elaborate on it. We can talk a little bit afterwards. Some of the details of this are confidential. This is under our Australian project. I'll leave it at that. But this is fully mixed asset. You see all kinds of different vendors here. Again, the business model is unique, though our customer can't share exactly that, but it is an Australian. I believe, and they have also openly said, I think this is one of the more advanced, mixed asset virtual power plant, solar plus storage projects in the planet. There was a question.
Who's next? Then get you.
My question revolves around the metering. How is this third party verified? Is the data we're seeing relative to the meter at the battery? And what would the utility be seeing? If the home was, let's say, drawing 3 kilowatts, and you can engage an energy resource to generate 1 kilowatt, well, from the utility's point of view, does that decrease in load?
Do you have a slide that shows some of these curves, right?
Shows the PD curves.
Jeff, you can answer it.
Yeah, happy to. In this particular program, the value that the utility sees is at the customer meter, and so they're just basing everything on the site meter as well as the battery power meter, and they'll take our data directly. Other programs, they cross-reference with the MI data. So in this case, it's just directly asset instrumentation.
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry, your name?
Noah,
With
AES Distributed Energy. I was wondering if there's an attempt in the optimization to maintain similar cycle counts that you're drawing from the different batteries or whatever DDRs there.
cycle counts as in
Like if you're
like charge, discharge cycles?
Yeah.
So that's, in this particular implementation, we have not set that as a constraint. That's an example of a constraint that could be built in to into the system, where for a given battery, if the vendor or the customer was looking to have that type of control and monitoring, that could be a constraint. We can only cycle it X times per week, per month, per year. That's the typical type of constraint that we deal with.
We have those constraints on other programs.
Tom Atkinson, EcoSurge. So in this model, who decides the priority of distribution? And then do the residential participants have control over their discharge?
Let me answer that. Again, very different business model in this particular case. This is a totally deregulated market. So some of this is happening without the wires business actually knowing that it's actually happening. I'll leave it at that and just say that all of the other things around the customer, that's actually done between the relationship between this retail provider and the customer. They give them a lot of control. That ultimately creates constraints around how these assets then behave. Yeah. Our job is to give our customers the flexibility to set all of these things, these different constraints. So we enable demonstration systems.
So all of the assets that are represented there are owned by the customer, is that correct?
In this particular business model, these are all customer-owned assets. That's
And-
correct.
and
So not utility or retailer-owned assets.
Okay, and then is the program utility develops and offers similar to a traditional demand response program that we have here? Is that how we're getting customers to sign up and
No.
control?
The answer is no. It's a very unique energy retailer proposition. That includes if you have a battery, if you have solar, if you want to sign up for a long-term energy rate at this lower cost than a regular rate. So again, think of this thing,
Yeah.
right? Nights and weekends free is just the beginning of what those retailers are actually doing in that world, which allows them to create very unique business models and financial models that both benefit the customer, to your point about the customer engagement. By the way, the customers usually get on this program as a second component, as a secondary concern to reliability first. They want backup. They want backup first, and then they'll sign up to these types of programs. It's these types of money. It's a very different world than what we have in most of North America. Doesn't mean we can't do it in
I
North
was just saying,
America.
that was my next question, will it work in North America?
I think,
We do, right?
I actually think if you go to Green Mountain Power, you have the beginnings of people starting to think outside the box and how they create a totally different relationship with their customer. It's still somewhat in a regulated context. They're trying to make that work. Today, their hammer that they have to use, or the instrument they have to use in the toolbox, is demand response. Again, here we have 6 different market streams. We're only showing you one. There's 6 different market streams that allow us to monetize assets. And there are certain parts of the day where the spot market energy price itself will pay for these assets. So it goes to thousands of dollars per megawatt. So we just have to think bigger. I just think we have to think more, we have to think bigger and broader in the business model context, and then these types of ideas come to bear. There is a question online, I believe.
There actually is a question online. Question is, what granularity are the aggregated DERs operating at? The distribution level, circuit, feeder level, substation level, or maybe even the distribution utility?
So I'll take this one, if it's okay. This particular example is being operated at the wholesale market. So it's the dot that connects to the wholesale market. There's other versions of this that are also being done locally at substation feeder type levels as well. We're just not demonstrating that, but it's all possible. More questions? This has been a hot topic, so we'll leave it here for a little bit.
In other words, with Tier Energy, are those primarily lithium-ion battery assets? Is that across the board?
100% behind the meter residential lithium-ion batteries. Mixed vendors, right? Multiple vendors, but all behind the meter, small lithium-ion.
Is that landscape changing anytime soon, or is that going to be the biggest driver into 2020, the next 3 years?
I think, Ravi, you want to jump in here?
I'm down to whether we could go.
Well, I was just going to say, I think you're going to continue to see lithium-ion drop price, starting to level out some, but it's still on a downward trend. A lot of people say, put that over like the drop of solid state drives, and like the curves are oddly similar. The numbers are very different, but the curves are oddly similar. And so, regardless whether it's large lithium-ion in front of the meter or behind the meter lithium-ion small, you're just going to see that cost curve per megawatt hour just keep going down, which is going to drive all of these business models. And that's why I think in this location, you see of the world, you see people who are willing to buy this product. They're actually, again, buying a multi-$1,000 product for reliability first. That's a different world. And are we going to see that in California in a wildfire world? Absolutely. You're going to see a lot of people saying, I just want backup. And with the price point now where it is, you can buy it. Not everybody. I recognize it is not a universal product. And certainly, all different income classes and demographics are not going to do that. But you're seeing the beginning of that. If we followed any technology curve like
this, we see what begins to happen on the technology over time. In 10 years, it will touch all demographics and all sizes, shapes, business models, leasing models, rental models, you name it. There was a question over here.
I had a question actually. Are you controlling the batteries directly or is it a cloud-to-cloud integration with the vendors?
Yes. We have no hardware at the site.
Okay.
But we do have direct control.
Okay.
We are directly steering. By the way, within the constraints, we can talk about that more later. There is pretty deeply NDA stuff in that we can't talk about.
But you saw summarized versions on the right-hand side there of some of the vendor constraints that we're having to deal with to produce that result.
Yeah, because I think the piece there for me is that if you have direct control of batteries, there's more that you can do, essentially.
Right, but that's different than how we connected them. So we're individually addressing each battery through a cloud-based API.
Vendor API.
Chaz,
Sorry.
you're coming into your own time.
I know.
It's your own panel.
It's so interesting. Like, is this, I mean, this is your software is awesome. Well, what would be different from a usability perspective if the battery itself decided what to do and you just provided an incentive to it? And so that like it was, so you just provided the same incentive to everybody and things would pick up.
Very different business model construct, not just for us, but also for the our customer in this case. And I think that, so it has pretty deep ramifications if you do that. I will mention that there are certain problems, going back to Mike's slide of all the layers in it, there are certain technical problems you can't solve by doing this. You actually have to solve by giving the device localized thresholds and constraints, and it's going to act, particularly around what's called FCAS, which is the frequency market and voltage. It has to do it locally. You can't do it fast enough. So you have to, we believe technically you have to kind of support both from a technology perspective, but the business model becomes very different, I think, if you go down that.
Super quick question, Phil, again, Freedom Forever Solar. So you mentioned that in this particular case, that reliability is driving the adoption, but I mean, obviously everyone's got a price point. So what kind of incentives are involved for this sort of level of adoption for battery storage? Zero?
So the customer writes a check to buy this product. It is, because the energy retailer is buying in volume, they're getting, I would say, a better price than they can get on the street. It's still pretty expensive.
So, we're talking Australia here. Again,
Yeah. Be very careful about where we're talking about in the world.
Sure.
The feedback regime there is very different than what we have in the US. It almost looks a lot more like Hawaii in terms of what the customers
Yes,
get.
that's 100% correct.
Okay.
So if you're doing, like, you can't export, so you need to try and absorb as much of the free fuel as possible. So if you have an oversized solar system, you're going to be, there's more of an incentive to have storage as well. So there's a lot, it's a multi-dimensional problem for sure. But there's not like an SGIP incentive like you see in California that doesn't exist in this market.
It almost seems like it's a need to do something different, right? Just more of a gradual incentive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different type of incentive, which is the customer figuring out how to more economically manage their energy and have better reliability. Because again, this is certain areas that, this is why the Elon Musk big battery project went in, was to fix reliability in this region. So like reliability is paramount. We're entering the summer in this part of the world. They're already experiencing huge spot market prices and blackouts and wildfires. California, in our context, gets a lot of press. Obviously, there are major parks outside of city that have already done blackouts as much as California. The same reasons. So wildfires, their view is climate change. So it's an interesting environment. Yeah. We could go on and on about this, but I just want to mention before we close this session, this section of the session, and move on to our panel. This is an example that we're showing here, but I want to come back to the core of this. Why do you need orchestration? One of the key reasons is because of all this variability. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Like we could be in Green Mountain, we could be in New England ISO, we could be in Japan, we could be in Australia.
when these things are set up, in order to get the most value, you have to be able to handle this kind of variability, this kind of dynamic nature of the problem, in order to extract all the value. And we believe that you need obviously orchestration to extract that.
Mike, I want to say thank you. We're going to take a very short, I apologize, it's warm in here, I know it's a little warm, so we're going to let everybody get up. Take a 5-minute break. Mike and Balin are going to help get everybody back in the room. In about 5 minutes, restrooms are down around the corner to the right. Please help yourself to some refreshments and t-shirts. And we'll get that started in 5 minutes with our panel.
That could be in charge. And it might change. So, beginning of the day, you might be able to, 9% fully charged. Some comes out, and then it has, some comes up, it's the ideal state of charge.
Smile open.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Grab a quick seat. I do want to just do a very, very quick reminder. I gotta get my own guys stuff on it. All right, so one real quick reminder. This website, gtmc.io, please answer. I think there's a survey question in there. It's about what do you want as your VPP? What's your favorite thing or software that you need as a VPP? That's why a quick reminder. We're going to go here till about a little bit before 5, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up discussion with the survey results. So please take that survey if you can. And then a quick reminder for our Woodmac GTM folks. By the way, I have no idea what to call you guys anymore. Like these things, these things say GTM somewhere. You say Woodmac. What do we call you?
Either's fine.
Either's fine. Okay. But please don't forget there is an opening reception for the full conference later this evening at 5:30. It says Women in Energy Storage and Allies. That's code for everybody's welcome. So please attend. It is literally within walking distance of this office. It's right down the street around the corner, a place called 10 Barrel Brewing. I didn't mention this before, but another fun fact about Colorado is that we brew more beer here per capita than any other state in the country. And 10 Barrel brews some of the best. So around, at least in this area, so you'll find beer everywhere. With that, we have a wonderful panel here to talk about the value of VPPs, how to do value stacking, led by Troy Anatra. Troy, would you like to introduce yourself and introduce the panel?
Sure. So my name is Troy Anatra, VP of Business Development for Enbala. Been with Enbala for about 4.5 years. Spent my entire career in the energy industry before that, working for a large demand response provider, as well as started off my career with a utility actually in New Jersey on East Coast based. Before I introduce folks, I'll relay a little slightly funny story. I was thinking about this panel last night. The last time I was asked to moderate a panel, the title of it was Squashing the Duck or Killing the Duck, something about reference to killing the duck here in California. For those of you that know me, you'll know that that topic made me a little bit uncomfortable. Number one, I don't eat meat or birds of any kind. My background is Italian. Of all the things for my last name to be in Italian, it's duck, actually. I'm thrilled that this panel is a little bit less violent focused.
But he is a hunt.
That's right. I will say though, I am excited too. There seems to be a lot of questions that we're gravitating towards around what is the value, what is the business model around distributed storage, around networks and distributed storage. So I think it'd be a good discussion. So I'll introduce folks, starting with my left and then moving down. We have Chaz Teplin. Chaz is manager at Rocky Mountain Institute's electric practice. Chaz studies resilient, clean, and cost-effective solutions that can modernize how the United States generates and delivers electricity. Work includes quantitative modeling and stakeholder facilitation. Chaz recently co-authored a report that got a lot of national attention about how clean energy portfolios, or like we like to say VPPs, are now cost competitive with traditional gas generation, which I think is very competitive here and there. Next we have Tom Arnold. So Tom Arnold is the commercial lead with National Grid Ventures Distributed Energy Team. In this role, in the unregulated part of National Grid, Tom helps build partnerships and accelerate the uptake of DERs across the U.S. Interestingly, a recent partnership was the grid services collaboration between National Grid Ventures and Sunrun. And as part of that team, Tom helped to take those grid services for residential batteries from concept to contracts, including recent award that some of you guys might have seen for 20 megawatts in Iceland for the capacity market. Next, we have my colleague at Enbala, Eric Huguenard. So Eric heads up our commercial operations group at Enbala. Where one of the many things he's focused on is evaluating the value of and building business cases around distributed energy resources. Eric has authored a few white papers on how to value stack and create the most value in EDRs. And then last year, that was the model, the two-tier model. And then last but not least, we have Ewan Keller. So Ewan comes to us from Fort Collins. Ewan manages Fort Collins Utility Residential Solar Rebate Program, so community solar program, and also distributed battery storage pilot. As a career sustainability professional, he has more than 25 years experience in energy efficiency, inside management, renewable generation, and storage. So as you can see, we have a pretty diverse group of folks from across the industry when it comes to distributed energy. So with that, I think we'll get right into it. First question that I had for you, Chaz, was kind of relates back to that report I just mentioned. But over the last few years, there's been a lot of discussion about valuing energy storage, how to value energy storage, and what role that plays in a grid with increasing amounts of renewable generation, increasing amounts of very variable intermittent renewable generation. So I'm curious, how is RMI seeing the evolution of storage's role within the market?
So unsurprisingly, we see that the world is a bright future for storage. So, in our report, we really looked at, how you can both provide energy and capacity with clean resources. And storage obviously doesn't provide energy, but it does provide capacity. And so, the real difference that you see in the cost of, say, a gas plant with clean energy or just providing reliability services is that dramatic cost in storage. And so I think that in an ideal world, like states and utilities and regulators would plan holistically and look at EPPs or clean energy portfolios and plan to integrate the cheapest sources of energy, which are now wind, solar predominantly, after efficiency, and mix those together with the right combinations of storage. But alternatively, as those resources come online, the ability for storage to make the use of that cheap energy possible is only going to increase. So, and I think we're seeing that already in a lot of utilities. So South here in Colorado, California, of course, there's been a lot of examples of what people are doing there. And then just as far as the duck curve goes, right? I mean, the key with all of these variable resources and EVs coming online as well, flexibility is the most valuable grid assets, and storage, perhaps coupled with good software, is the most flexible resource. So whatever the value stack is, basically storage helps with that.
Do you have to wait for the duck curve to actually be there?
Ideally, like I said, I think you would plan your virtual power plant. But we'll see. We'll see if we have that much foresight.
Great. Next question, I want to kind of direct to you, Ewan. So you have the distributed energy pilot that you're actively managing right now. You also have a pretty ambitious goal of 100% renewables by 2030, which, you guys can check my math, I think it's 10 years from now. And right now you're at 30%, is that right?
Right.
Yeah. So just curious if you can talk a little bit about the pilot and how you see that pilot, after the post-pilot period and how that will help with that.
Sure, absolutely. This pilot is a vehicle for us to demonstrate how to first work the technologies that we're talking about. We have one commercial scale battery in building that I work in Fort Collins, our utilities administration building. We've got a couple of dozen different customer-owned residential scale batteries in our territory, but we don't have the ability to monitor or
influence or control those at all. Through the pilot, we are seeking to develop the capability to monitor those assets and then also enhance that with control over different kinds of batteries, not just one in our own building, but also some other residential scale batteries, some consumer owned and some potentially owned by the utility. But that will be determined a little bit more by the whether we get funding for the next couple of years for that particular expansion. So, did you want me to talk about the value streams coming out of that?
Yeah, curious too. I'm sure folks have some questions in their mind too from previous questions about, what is that business model too? Are you offering incentives to customers to participate?
Yeah. Right now, I'm designing an incentive to participate. And again, that's really contingent on future funding. So I'll just talk about what we've seen so far in terms of real tangible benefits. So in Fort Collins, we have no restriction on export to the grid for customers with solar or customers with battery for that matter. They're both on the same net metering rate, and that net metering rate has a time of day differential value. It's about a 16 cent per kilowatt hour differential between off-peak and non-peak. So customers with storage can effectively charge their batteries from the grid during the day and discharge during the non-peak hours, which are 5 to 9 p.m. now in some months, to completely discharge their battery to the grid, not just meet their on-site load. So for, just to give you some round numbers, for a residential customer on that time of day rate, assuming a 10 kilowatt hour battery, they could make $150 to $400 a year if they fully dispatch that battery to the grid during those on-peak hours. Whether that's sort of non-peak load or but that's only about 3% of the value of the cost of the battery for 1 year's worth of arbitrage on that rate structure. For a commercial customer, the value is really more in managing demand. That's $9 a kilowatt. And some quick math on using the battery that we've got, we could generate about 3 to 4% of the cost of that battery in reducing that demand charge for our building. So what's up in the air is still the value of solar self-consumption. That's up to the customer. And it's all over the place. And backup power, we don't have a reliability concern in Fort Collins. All of our distribution asset infrastructure is underground, so we've got a really high reliability, and not many customers would be placed like
Turn it over to Tom too. Curious, a lot of the, getting more and more storage that's hitting the grid, but a lot of it is focused on very large scale, grid scale, megawatts worth of storage. Although I believe, and folks can check me on this, that there is a trend where there is smaller networks and smaller distributed storage that is accelerating. I think more and more those types of networks are adding some of them that we talked about. So curious from your perspective, from somebody that's kind of worked on that, that Sunrun project, as well as your role in National Grid, canvassing the market, and looking at what IOUs are doing, as well as your IOU, other half there at National Grid. What are some of the barriers that you might see, as well as opportunities for these networks of smaller distributed storage assets?
Yeah, so as you touched on, where our team sits within National Grid, we've got an interesting perspective. You can see from our regulated base what their experience is from trying to maximise the value that you get from distributed storage, and then from the projects that we've just been working on with Sunrun, where we were working with them to build out aggregations of residential battery portfolios to offer good services back to utilities. So from that sort of from that experience, we were able to talk to lots of utilities around the country to sort of understand where they were in terms of incentives for storage and how they were thinking about it, what some of the barriers were for them really to be able to get the most out of assets that were already out there. And I think, as we all know, every utility has their own challenge and different perspectives. I think some of the trends that were popular fairly frequently we probably covered throughout the day already. So, one, having a program construct that works. We talked about the Green Mountain Power and the Urban Voice program. I think as a sort of a way of providing a simple incentive that developers, customers, and the utility can understand. That was sort of that led the market from that space. So I think number one is having simple mechanisms and structures for people to understand. And getting that in place is a major barrier. And linked to that is it's difficult to actually put dollar values on incentives. I know from the extensive work that was done within National Grid to values on our connected solutions programs, actually getting to that dollar value it's not easy. It takes time, it takes a lot of internal resource, getting it right is obviously important. And then lastly, I think very pertinent for Enbala, having the right software channels or just generally the right processes for communicating with those students and assets. So having thought through that in advance of having a program is really
excellent. Touch on the National Grid Connected Solutions projects. One of the utility customers, partners that we had a view that, I forget exactly how they put it, but it was something to the effect that these assets are coming, they're keeping their grid no matter what, so they're going to actually do something about it. Not everybody has that viewpoint, just different dynamics, different local politics. There is sometimes a desire in order to, I guess, wait until you get to a certain point until things become a certain issue. Kind of curious your perspective, both from that experience as well as what we've been seeing else around the country, and the world for that matter. I guess in a perfect world, you don't wait for the things to hit your grid, but how do you recommend utilities maybe navigate that challenge of doing something about it before it becomes a problem, actually taking advantage of the assets that are there if they're being built?
Yeah, I think generally being proactive is important across the whole supply chain. So again, having that perspective within some, what was really important there is so the most meaningful interaction that someone have with a customer is the discussion leading up to assets being installed. So if you're able to use that platform that you've got to discuss with the customer what it would mean to them to have their assets involved in a program, it's great timing. The customer's excited about the assets that they're going to have. It's the right time to have that conversation. So that's predicated by the developer knowing what the utility can offer in terms of incentives and what the program is. So I think from that respect, it's really important that utilities are thinking about how they want these programs to work up front. So the communications across the supply chain.
Which is a bit of a push forward at getting utilities actually having those well-designed programs ready to go and developers trying to start something in advance of those order back with that.
Yeah, and what we found was worked really well for someone as well as early communications across the across the supply chain. So it's an ABDP kind of here. So we were having discussions with you guys ahead of your clean energy RFI, so that there was knowledge going into the procurement process of how these batteries could work and how they would actually show up on the grid and what are done in terms of KWs at certain times of year ahead of going into a whole procurement process and design. So I think, yeah, the information is always.
Yeah, I think that kind of technology utility partnership early on will help get ahead of the curve there. Yeah. I think it's really important. You touched on how it's difficult to kind of find that value that customers need or the incentive that they need in order to actually do something. And I think that's going to kind of sort itself out as well. I think the utility and the technology partners work together to actually figure out how to define that value and capture it, then, aggregators, all the curtailment service providers, UPP providers will figure out, what that incentive level is required of the customer. So it's kind of get ahead of the curve.
Listening to this, I keep thinking, to your question about should we plan ahead or not, it seems like utilities have the ability to plan ahead, and so you're seeing more front of your big story because they see the obvious value and they can capture it, but that information isn't really passed on to the customers. The customers are primarily installing like the number one use in Australia, California, Hawaii is like backup, right? It actually has an obvious value, and like maybe they get to benefit a little bit by benefiting the customers or some of that, but it's like because that information, even if it's valuable, the grid isn't really transmitted to customers. There's, other than this green glow, there's not really an obvious reason in those places.
We talk a lot about value stacking, but in this country, you guys seeing much more than what we talked about before, which is really demand response value and peak demand charge management savings. Are you seeing? We've obviously had some experience with frequency regulation and PJM, and that kind of built up pretty quickly. Are you guys seeing any other value streams right now?
I think that behind the meter, the peak demand management is an obvious one in a lot of places, and so I'm not sure it always. Sometimes I think it doesn't benefit the grid, in the most optimal way, or even at all. So it's not ideal. But again, I think it's because the actual cost to the grid is really conveyed through a financial mechanism. There's no real time of these rates until the actual costs.
When you have customer-owned assets and not necessarily the clearest price signals from the utility for how to dispatch those assets in order to benefit the distribution grid, that's sort of what you end up with. Customers optimizing their retail rates that are intended to be as aligned as they possibly can be with the actual cost of the grid, but are not necessarily optimal.
Yeah. Let's not forget we got to finance these batteries too, right? So what value streams can you actually count on?
I guess it's like that. I'm curious, like from the utilities in the room. Like, I know every time I ask, there's always pushback to like more transparent time of these rates that customers will involve with that. But now there's an opportunity to take advantage of that and realize the benefits of utilities in terms of realizing the storage from the meter. Is that conversation changing? Are people starting to recognize that, or is that just wants the energy wants and that hasn't broken down?
You guys have anything?
I think, increasingly as if there's more and more residential PPPs, and it becomes easier for developers or directly for customers to be able to monetize capacity that their battery provides, then the whole thing becomes more transparent. The value is more apparent to everyone, customer side, utility side. So I think as you get more and more scale, there's more development
I think you want to add one thing.
I wanted to add more because you mentioned the time of day rates and how customers respond to what they see. So we put that cheese in front of them, with the peak period, the on-peak rate and the opportunity to sell back to the grid at 24 cents a kilowatt hour. Some of those customers with batteries are discharging at that time, and some of them aren't. And part of this pilot will be to interview some of those folks and understand why they are or are not responding to that economic signal. And for those who are, we're incentivizing a relatively passive response that also provides a value to the utility in reducing our own demand charge by almost $6 a kW, plus a $4 to $6 kW coincident peak charge. And that only matters for that coincident peak charge in the 1 hour that's a coincident with the wholesale peak for the month. So if we hit that night that our on peak hour and the customers is using their battery to discharge it, then we won. So sometimes the value is there, but sometimes it's not. But that's how that value is also making a difference at the utility wholesale.
Eric, I know you've done some analyses. There are, we've talked about distributed energy storage, we've talked about residential, we've talked about commercial here and there. The economic and use cases are, economics and use cases are a little bit different between those two different segments. Curious, especially from a utility perspective, should we be focusing on any one of those right now, given where we are in the industry, or taking a more holistic approach, or something else?
Yeah, I think so. The answer probably cut to the chase that we should probably be focusing on all of them. In North America in particular, I think because the price signals are stronger for the commercial segment, the demand response programs that are often geared towards that segment, and obviously demand charges are generally more lucrative than time and use rates. We're seeing most of it on the C&I side, but it's interesting on the residential side that you have customers that are more willing to put value in some of those softer benefits, like doing good for my utility, buying green, getting some backup power reliability services. Those are things that you probably wouldn't see in the commercial industrial segment. So you have varying business models. I think front of the meter even should be in the mix as well. Obviously, we're thinking about coordinating across everything. They don't have to be siloed. You can only control either the distributed resources. So I think the bottom line is that we need to really be considering them all, and as we move beyond just optimizing retail rates, it's going to be more and more important.
We heard earlier that I think it was 50% of installations are paired with solar. Curious, I'll ask you first, Chaz, do you need to pair storage with solar to make the economics work, or is that what we're finding is necessary, or stand on it?
I think it's the solar, it's the storage, right? Like the place, not in Colorado, right, where you don't need the storage yet, but California, why you need storage, otherwise it's the solar has very low value. So I think whether they have to be co-located, it depends on the incentives in place. But I think obviously as renewables come online, the need for some storage tracks. And so places where a lot of renewables are need storage, but most of the country in North America, the United States is not there yet. But you can see the future in Hawaii, California, years.
Yeah, I think just as a general point, with more and more territories on them to 100% clean energy, it just makes sense to have storage connected with different sorts of so forth. And I think that's the way the incentives are set up. We wanted it to. So yeah, again, from the work we did with sort of everyone of solid was absolutely positive. And it's an easier proposition for a customer as well. It's the value stream. So,
Excellent. Well, before we kind of go to our concluding thoughts here, I'm going to call a little bit of an audible, hopefully you guys don't mind. We didn't say we're going to do Q&A, but there were so many questions before around kind of the value streams and business case stuff. I think we could just take a couple questions if anybody has it, since these guys are more experts in the industry, different parts of the industry, you might have some questions. So open it up to anybody with any questions.
I'm teaching from the Digital Ventures. We've talked a lot about value, and it seems there can be a lot of value that comes from deregulated markets where there's a very competitive energy market pricing. So that's fantastic, and hopefully we get more of that and we can really incentivize storage and flexibility. But what about longer term projects? So for example, for National Grid, if you're looking at avoiding the cost of installing new transmission lines or distribution cables, that is a huge avoided cost that's millions and millions of dollars. How do we factor that into flexibility pricing? Are we looking at that at all within the context in which you're working?
So yes. So again, just going back to my corporate caveat, I've got a couple of hands here. So I can't sort of talk completely advanced to do regulating businesses and certainly a regulated side. So, but on the regulated side, so National Grid has implemented projects for sort of a battery circuit that was put there, which is avoided by building out a new transmission line. So storage as a vehicle for avoiding transmission and distribution investments is very much front of mind. That's I guess it's a much more straightforward business case when it's a utility scale. It's that sort of decision point. So then flipping over to my other hat with when we were working with certain on the services side. So I think it can be quite a nebulous concept for utilities to value this distribution deferral that can come from aggregated residential storage, in the example that we're looking at. And you need the batteries on the right feeder, right place. And I think until you get to having a basic proliferation of storage, it might not show up at a scale that's meaningful. But I think as we build towards a point where there's more and more distributed batteries, it will become more and more power value streams and utilities, and it will be easier to value. So to conclude, I think it's on everyone's mind, but how obvious the value derived from it is it's a bit higher.
Just point out more and more regulatory agencies and even state legislatures are mandating people to look at non-wires alternatives in all planning. So obviously not everywhere, but more and more common that that's happening. I guess I'd also just caution, I think if all the states plan decarbonization actually start to actively make that happen, I think demand will increase dramatically with building and vehicle electrification, even without the best intentions. So I don't think that grid modernization or capacity upgrades are going to be completely unneeded, even with the best use of storage. But those costs presumably be deferred or partially mitigated by intelligent use of storage to make that additional capacity, distribution level capacity, less expensive.
To be careful, it could be its own topic, right?
Definitely its own topic.
Maybe just one more question, sure.
As the markets start to get more granular for distribution,
avoidance, how do you prevent yourself from paying those who are causing the congestion to the congestion, right? So if you've got somebody who's charging 3 electric vehicles all at once, and then they also have some energy storage, and then they inject back into the grid, they cause the congestion that they themselves are then being paid to relieve. How do you?
Real-time pricing?
I tried location.
Locational pricing.
Yeah. All right, I don't want to be too much of a roadblock between us and the brewing company. So just one quick final thought from the team. Kind of curious looking down the road here. If you had to give one tip to a utility or maybe a developer who's about to embark on a new distributed storage project, what would that be?
I guess my advice would be to define what the grid services that you actually need are, instead of starting with I need batteries, or but say this is what is going to cost us the most money and we really need to solve, and then just go out and ask for all of the different technologies. What services can you provide at what cost, and then combine them and find your own to get the least cost solution. Hopefully you can profit by doing that, as well as saving your customers.
Yeah. Building on that, I think what we've seen is really helpful from the utility and the development perspective is just clear and transparent pricing. So to I guess to big up what we've done in our own yards, like the National Grid Connected Solutions, where we have all the pricing available on the website. There's a rough idea of dispatch hours, and develop dispatches for and I think there's others like grants and that that we talked about, but also vegans for transparency, which I think that's the way forward for getting more and more of these assets in the system.
I mean, it's super complicated. It's hard to figure out the rules.
Yeah. I would say for a utility, just get involved. So relying on more passive demand response, I think is one way to go. It will save some of your peak, but it's not going to be optimal. I think get involved in the actual management and direct control of the assets and make sure that they're there when you need them.
I would say recognize the rate of change in this value stack. For us in particular, I think the value stack is going to be completely different for us in 5 years. Certainly within 10, if the Southwest Power Pool idea comes together, we really need that to participate in the power pool in order to exercise or access a lot of the other potential values in the stack. So we need to, as utilities, preserve the benefit stream and a value stack for customers, consumers that we're asking to participate in this buying their assets, and other stakeholders, and potentially provide financing vehicles for them to participate. Also prepare for the need for grid loads to be a lot more responsive to grid energy generation curves in the future, so that loads could be more flexible and controllable and schedulable, as that's going to define the way that we identify value and rates in the future.
Great. I know from Enbala perspective too, one of the things that we would recommend and look for is diversity. So diversity, customer size, we want to hear about types of technology, and other complementary programs that are there, right? Making a more cohesive opportunity for utility to offer more flexibility and more options. But we'll end there. Thank you guys so much for participating. Really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Okay, as we wrap up here towards the end of the day, I guess I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you again. Secondly, I just want to ask, are there any general questions or thoughts or feedback that this group would actually like to share here with us just quickly about the session? Did you get some value out of this? Did you learn something new? Did you not learn a darn thing, it's a complete waste of time. Just kind of curious, please.
I'm going to chime in and say that I think this type of discussion is needed badly with all the players that are involved in trying to solve this problem. The only way we're going to do it is getting into the room together like this and discussing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts from the group? No? Got one over here, he's smirking.
I'm probably the most ignorant of all this topic that we've been talking about today, so I found it to be a really great way to jump into the pool, if you will, and it was really helpful.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna pull up our results here. Not sure.
Just going to the
One about.
polls.
Okay. This is my own response.
We can go back.
What am I supposed to do? Pull up the word cloud.
You have to just enter something, and then you'll be able to see
Okay.
something. There we go.
So we got a bunch of the same answers, it looks like, or a bunch of ones here. This one's flexibility to charge behind-the-meter storage, local storage for grid, battery storage, demand response solar. But basically, I think we covered the entire waterfront here. So electric vehicles, we see EVs, we got loads. I think what's interesting about this, just from my perspective, is you see kind of everything covered. So this need of, it's not just one silver bullet that we need, it's not just one thing, it's a whole collection of things. EV charging, I think, is going to show up a lot here, and I think we did the same survey a year or two down the road. We're going to see that come way up. Of course, energy storage is here with the energy storage conference. That's why everybody's probably here.
What's V2G there in town vehicle?
Vehicle to grid. So that's the vehicle giving back to the grid, not just because again today we're in this world of protocols. Back to this question about protocols. What can you do with an EV charging station? Mostly you can turn it off. Right? You can't get that car to give it back here. We're still in the world of standards and trying to figure that out. Great. Well, I just want to say thank you again from myself, our extended team. This has been a really wonderful session. In fact, frankly, this exceeded our expectations in terms of participation. As you can tell, we need a big room. And the interactivity, we really, really appreciate it. You will be getting a survey from the WoodMac GTM folks. The survey will then lead you to getting the slides and the video from the live stream that you can share. So you have to do the survey to get those. Little sticky carrot kind of thing going on. And the most important sticky carrot is 10-barrel brewing. Down the street, it's a 10-minute walk if you want to walk. You're going to go out this building, down the street that way, turn left, right down Walnut. Super easy to get to. It's also about a 3-minute Uber if you want to just grab an Uber. The sun is setting, so it's getting a little chilly outside. So.
How are the sidewalks for walking?
The sidewalks look good. At least the sidewalks that I walked on earlier today look fine. I will not guarantee or take liability for what it's like down there. But I believe the sidewalks are probably.
They're mostly clear with occasional ice. Heels, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. See you down at 10.